Welcome to the Impact Multiplier CEO podcast. If you're a chief executive, or if you think like one, and you want to create exponentially greater impact, then this show is for you. My name is Richard Medcalf, founder of Xquadrant. I coach some of the most successful and impressive CEOs and executive teams on the planet and help them achieve extraordinary results. And no matter how successful you've been in the past, there's always a whole new level of impact available to you. So, if you're ready to play a bigger game than ever before, I invite you to join us and become an Impact Multiplier CEO. Today, I speak with Helene Barnekow. Helene is the CEO of Microsoft in Sweden. And before that, she was the chief executive of Telia, the incumbent telecoms operator in Sweden. And before that, she held very senior roles within EMC, Sony Ericsson, and other companies. In our discussion today, we look at a variety of things. How did she rise up to such high ranks within the tech sector, starting off as she did as a marketing manager with no technology sector experience many years ago? How she learned to build high-performing teams and create diversity in what's been a very male-dominated culture. We cover so many areas, really what's driving her and how she's able to differentiate herself and create value and maintain that value even as her diary gets full and full with more and more corporate and customer requirements. So enjoy this conversation from a very senior and experienced chief executive, Helene Barnekow of Microsoft. Hello, Helene. Thank you for joining me.
Hello, Richard. Great to be here. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, well, I was just thinking it's been a long time. We engaged, I think, probably 10 years ago now when I was at Cisco and you were at Telia Sonera. And obviously a lot of things have changed since then. So I'm loving the opportunity to be able to catch up and I really see what's been happening, right? You're now the CEO of Microsoft in Sweden. Obviously before that, you had other senior executive roles as well in tech and telecoms. And so I think today what I'd love to do is kind of get into how you've got to where you've got to and how you create the impact that you create. It's fantastic to see if I may say so, a woman, right, at a very high level in a tech company. There's more and more of them, but it's still not enough. And so I think you've been probably a trailblazer in some of those respects as well. But before we jump into that, could you perhaps give me or give us a quick introduction as to your story, right? How I know you said I'm somebody without a tech background who's ended up right in the heart of tech. So in just a minute or so, what's been that journey for you that's ended up with you in this role at Microsoft?
Yeah, it feels like it's been a long journey now, but I studied international business, and at the time I graduated, there was no such thing as a tech sector. There was, of course, engineering companies, but not really tech the way we think about it today. And I was very keen on working internationally, which I've done most of my career actually. So I studied languages and marketing and management, and that was my thing. And then I ended up by coincidence ending up in tech already back in '93, I think it was. And it was really a coincidence. I came in as marketing manager, and I found it absolutely exhilarating when I saw what software could do. And I thought, in 1994, we didn't live our lives in Teams and in over the mobile phone and smartphones, etc. So it was really, to me, I think that realization of, wow, this is going to have major impact and transform how we live and how we work and all of it. So that was the starting point. And then I've been fortunate to have so many incredibly inspiring jobs in different companies, mostly in large companies. So I've been with Ericsson and Sony Ericsson and EMC and then Telia, and then now with Microsoft. So amazing companies, very different cultures, I would say, also coming from different geographies, but all of them being very innovation and tech driven. So I think that's my red thread somehow.
Yeah. Fantastic. And so as you've navigated through those kind of blue chip brands, what's driven your impact, right? How did you what's that success formula? What are the kind of couple of key things, perhaps, about how you've shown up that's made you move from being a marketing manager when you first arrived, not even knowing much about tech, into being this CEO?
I think it's a really good question, and we should reflect on exactly that question more often. Actually, I think the first thing, and not maybe also one of the reasons why they gave me a chance in the beginning, also in the R&D departments. I think it is my passion to make a difference. I'm very focused on making a difference and having an impact and contributing to a bigger picture. I'm a real team player. I want to see us making a difference. So it's not about me, and I think that's a really important point. The other, I think, is that I am truly customer obsessed, and I think part of it came from being the only not engineer in so many rooms, and my contribution was very often the customer, the user interface, and how would that translate into value for a customer, and then that transformed me into being even more customer obsessed and spending plenty of time with the customers. So that's for sure my second point. And I think my third point would be that passion for people in general, but also connecting that to how I believe you build really high performing teams. And here I learned early on that with diversity and real inclusion in your culture, you can achieve magnificent results to what you can if you don't. So I've been always driving in all the companies I've been really taking that flag very high in terms of diversity and inclusion in real, not just because it's good to show representation, but more because of how I build the teams, how I get the results, and therefore it becomes a business imperative.
Yeah, and tell me about that. How have you found that having those diverse teams? How does that help performance? How you said it was very important into how you build teams. So how do you find that? What's the value in that you see?
Yeah, no, it's huge value, and they're from different levels. But I think just to give some context to that, I didn't realize I was going to have to work with this, because when I started working, I thought my parents' generation had already figured this out for us. So we were all seen as equal potential good contributors. And then when I came into the tech space, and still it's very male dominated, right? But I was very often the only woman in the room. So when I got my first managerial position with Ericsson, I remember sitting down and thinking, okay, now I have the opportunity to actually build a leadership team that can show that you can come from different backgrounds, and I can, I have a platform where I can drive that change and explore how that can add value, not just be a good thing to do. And I think there are at least three different levels. And I think one level is talent. In most of the years in the positions I've been looking for, we have a shortage of talent. So if you don't really become very good at actually seeing the whole market, irrespective of gender or cultural background or whatever it is, you are going to miss out. The second part is, of course, understanding your customers. When you don't reflect your customers and you only have one side of what the customer could look like, you miss the opportunity to be customer obsessed properly. And the third thing, and I didn't know this 20 plus years ago, but now we know from research, diverse teams, and especially when you manage to create an inclusive culture, they perform at a much higher level, and they're also the more profitable teams. We didn't know that at the time, but my feeling was that was the case, because I clearly felt how the teams became more innovative, and it was easier to have a very open, transparent climate because different questions were being asked, etc. And now there is a ton of research actually proving exactly that point.
Absolutely. Yeah, and it's interesting, isn't it? I think when we start to look at complexity, as you know, one of the things that I help leaders with is really just manage that complexity and that volatility and all the ambiguity of that we go through, and actually divergent perspectives is the way to see in three dimensions, right? I mean, or multiple dimensions. We're all going to look at it from a certain perspective, and none of us has all the insights. And I think really realizing that when you have those different lenses available to you, it does add so much.
I think it's so important what you're saying, and I think this is exactly why this has become it was maybe something that people were trying to do for nice to have, and now it's a business imperative, because as ambiguity has increased, speed has increased, and also industries are disrupting each other. So the uncertainty is everything is exponential. So if you fill your room with people thinking exactly alike, you will be disrupted. And and it was not the case like that 20 years ago, 30 years ago, but today it's the case. And the more you can actually create that culture where diverse talent want to be part of and feel they can show up to do their best, I think that's the safest way of actually, proving your company to succeed in the future, and to really be on your toes for disruption.
Absolutely. Yeah, it's fascinating. And I think the other things I wanted to go back to, things that you said earlier on, I think were really important, and I didn't want to just skip over them, because you talked about your passion to make a difference and contribution. And as you know, the podcast is called the Impact Multiplier, because I think this idea of impact, for me, it's so important. Because it speaks to this broader reach that you can have. It's about the financials, but it's also about the people. It's also about what happens in the world and what you can create. But it's also, for me, the success is the key to getting over your own fears. So this idea of contribution, right? When you're contributing, when you're trying to maximize your contribution, then you can get over the fears and doubts and anything going on internally, because you're on a mission, right? You're trying to make an impact. And I think you talked then about the customer obsession, and I think again, interestingly, that comes back to this idea of, well, contribution we just talked about. You wanted to be obsessed about how do I contribute to the customers, but also it speaks to that diversity issue of you were bringing a fresh perspective. You had an engineering room of engineers, and you were bringing the customer perspective and not the engineering perspective. And I know when I was doing my roles in tech, I was often bringing the business or the financial perspective to a room of engineers or whatever it is. But that value of translation is really important. I suppose coaching executive today, and she's incredibly gifted woman, but hadn't quite realized the value of that skill set of being able to translate from one world to the other, because she felt it wasn't a kind of a hard skill in some level. It was kind of, it's not really knowledge. I'm just kind of doing basics. You're not doing basic stuff. You're actually helping people understand each other, and it's incredibly valuable because you generate insights as you do that.
Absolutely. No, I couldn't agree more. I think I think also what you're saying now, I think that's why also, and I think I learned along the way. In the beginning, I was mostly focused on diversity, and then I realized with diversity and that you showcase that you think it's important, it makes it easier to recruit. But to keep people, you need to have that inclusive environment, because then when you show up with a skill set, which is actually what you just described, which is extremely valuable from an impact and value creation, but that's not the norm for the skill set. So you may even feel like you're not contributing, and you may even hold back because you're talking about things that nobody else is talking about. So it's probably not so relevant, and you don't even understand what some of the people in the room are saying. So then I think you as a leader, when you manage to create that inclusive culture and everybody feels like, okay, I can contribute here. I have a different perspective, or I have a skill set that nobody else has in this room. And if this doesn't get heard, we will actually perform at a lower level than we could. And I think that's what you can do with an inclusive culture, which is why that's so magical. But if you don't have it, you will have a number of those people with skill sets that they're not even sure if they should bring forward, because it doesn't look like the norm. So maybe there is no value to this. So there's a huge responsibility on leadership here to actually create that platform. Then people can really, really, I think, blossom and really perform in those environments.
So tell me more about how do you do this? How do you create these high performing teams? Obviously, you've been this manager in these, say, a whole increasing levels in a whole stack of blue chip tech companies. So like you get a new team. Like what do you do, right? How do you actually, like, what are your mental models that you start to use to think, okay, how am I gonna get this team to play at its best?
Yeah, no, and this is maybe the most important question of all, I think, for any company. So I think it always starts with why. So you need to understand why are we going to do what we're doing, or why are we starting a new journey, or why are we transforming? And I think it sounds obvious, but I think so many people skip that, or they
Mm,
talk about something which is not aspirational. We need to reduce costs. How
mm.
many people wake up in the morning and feel excited about only reducing costs if there's not a bigger purpose? So I think I think the first thing to do is to align on what is that vision, what's the reason we're doing this, why are we working so hard, what do we want to achieve? And currently, when we look at the impact we want to have in Microsoft Sweden, we have societal goals and we have commercial goals. So we want to contribute to
Mm.
sustainability or this digital skilling of the country, etc.
Mm.
Right? So then you have a why. There's a bigger purpose, and I think this is really, really important.
It's
To
interesting.
me, though, sorry, go ahead.
So I just wanted to weigh in on that because I was working with the CEO about an hour ago on this question, and he was translating some of the corporate goals, because we realized that the corporate goals were very clear in a way, and there's quite inspirational stuff there, but they're actually phrased in terms of what the company wanted to achieve.
Mm,
And they didn't go that step further, which is and so what's the impact of that on anybody else? I mean, it
yes.
was kind of implicit,
Yeah.
but we really, he said to really realize the power of taking the kind of the corporate KPIs and turning them round to look at them from the point of
Yes.
view of how our customers impacted, how society
Yes.
impacted, how
Yes.
my employee is going to be impacted, and talk about that impact
I think
rather
that's
than just the
very
fact that you get
powerful.
to X billion and you
Yes.
get great place to work and all this kind of stuff.
Yes.
Right? What's the impact?
I think that's very powerful to do that. And I think it's you want to deliver on all those KPIs, but that makes a difference, what you just described, if you understand what that impact is, which is bigger
Mm,
than just reaching your company KPIs from an internal perspective. So I tend to always start there,
mm.
and then I've learned to connect that with, and now we come into the teams and the leadership, but I learned to connect that with your own personal why. So why are you here? So why did I take this job? Why did I want to be CEO of Microsoft Sweden? Or why did I want to join Telia? Or because that creates a connection, and also it creates reflection and connection to the company,
Mm.
the company vision and journey, and where you're on. And it also creates authenticity on your leadership when you can actually stand up and talk about that. And that's a
Yeah,
really
it
good
has to come from
exercise
you,
to do.
right? It has to come from
Yes.
you. It can't just be, I was given this by corporate
No,
headquarters,
there
here
is
it
my corporate
is.
purpose. Now let's do
Yeah,
our KPIs. It doesn't work that way, I think.
yeah, you
And
have to embody it. You've got to find
you
that link for you to embody
you
it.
have to find that link, and I think that's a really good exercise to do with your team, especially when you're new.
Mm.
Really I would really encourage everybody to do that. And then I think we've had in all my teams, we've spent ample of time then working as a team. I'm a big believer in teams, and teams don't exist by themselves. They exist because you invest in them and you build them.
Mm.
And through all the phases, we spend time on both getting to know each other, but talking about the values and talking about the culture we want to build, and what does that look like and how does that show up. And by doing this, you really form a team that you either on the same team, or you probably feel, oh, maybe this is not for me, actually, maybe I don't align with my own purpose. And that's much better to then realize that,
Yeah.
than to not realize it, or 3 years later be frustrated because you didn't realize that somebody else was taking it in this direction. So invest in the team, spend that time together, talk about the things that really matter. It's not about doing scary stuff in the woods or on the mountains. It's about talking about,
Yeah.
to me, it's about talking
Yeah.
about things that really matter, and creating that openness that everybody feels this is okay. We are here to really be that open with each other, and we want to do that. And by doing that, we will have greater impact. I think this is really important. And sometimes I think we become sloppy with this because we
Mm.
feel, oh, everybody's a senior now, so they figured this out. But that's not what this is about. It's not about seniority. It's about being part of that team and trusting that team, and
Yes.
therefore having more impact.
Hello, it's Richard here with a quick interlude. These conversations are all about upgrading how you think about creating impact. So here's a resource to help you do just that whilst staying fast and focused. The CEO's checklist for challenging times is a quick way to enhance your thinking and detect blind spots, even when things are moving incredibly fast and you're not sure what's going to happen next. You can get this powerful checklist of 17 world-class strategies by heading to xquadrant.com/go/challenging times checklist with a hyphen between each of those three last words. Now, back to the conversation. Absolutely. In fact, the more senior you are, it's not always, senior people are often great at managing their organizations. They're not always that great at being part of a team, right?
No.
I mean, a lot of what I do is I turn teams of high performers into high performing teams because, being able to run an organization and drive results is quite different from partnering with a team for cross-functional business goals.
Yes, it is. I totally agree with you.
So I guess my question.
Sorry. Go ahead.
No, I guess my question for that was: is do you ever get pushback because, talking about the why and connecting to our personal whys? I buy into it, right? But I can imagine that there might be more, action-focused, inverted commas, pragmatic individuals who are like, let's just get on. We know we've got to hit the budget. Let's get going.
Yes,
why are we talking
absolutely.
about this? How do you deal with that?
Sure. And there, especially in senior people, you have some of that cynicism as well. We've done all of this before, etc. And this is my point. I think you can have done some of these things in different teams, and you still need to do this. You still need to invest. So I think one is to. I've had sessions when I've had several people like that, and we've really taken the time to and I've had help from outside to do this in a good way, but really good individual feedback, really break that protection that is around certain leaders. And usually it's been absolutely amazing, to be honest, because once you can, in a safe environment, actually break down that, because usually it's a wall that you built around yourself, and you're like, okay, this is not my thing, and it's just wasting time, and it's really fascinating to see when you can actually break down wall down and also see the difference in impact from that person. There, I have examples of where people have felt, well, this is probably not for me. This is maybe not how I operate. I want to be in a pure numbers environment. I don't need to have my team. I don't need to be part of a team. I want to run with my KPIs. And then that's to me also fine to discover that. So there've been a couple of those, and then usually you decide that they're it's better to part ways, which is also fine. That's part of life as well, right? And I'm sure we have both in our long careers also come across leaders where we feel like, he's probably excellent, but I'm not sure we are the best match here. And I think we are way too how should I say? I think we are. We need courage to talk about those things, because I think it's and it's not about and again, this thinking about my diversity topic, it's not about being the same. It's not about I want to do exactly as him or not. It's if you find that magic between, if you find that match in terms of how you get more things done. I think that's what you're looking for when you talk about leaders and team members.
Yes, yeah, it's interesting. I mean, I think this is something there about, you want diversity, but not in some ways not too much, because you go onto any internet page, right, and where like people can't even listen to each other because they're so opposed on some levels, right? And so it's this kind of tension, right? You don't want people who all think the same, but you've also got to have some common ground or some common values or something upon which you can build.
And I think that's why you need to build a team. And when I look at some of my teams, and now I always keep building to become more diverse. So the fact that you have more diverse backgrounds, of course, then maybe even more, you need to talk about these things. What do we mean with that culture? What does that mean? What does that value mean to be courageous? What's courageous in your culture? With different backgrounds, it can be completely different things, right? So I think the more diverse you are, the more important it is to actually do that work with the team, and to really foster those dialogues and openness.
Fascinating. Yeah, I totally agree. I mean, this building the definitions of words, right? What does language mean? What do we actually mean when we say something? I think that's So important. I had a question. We didn't quite do this. So I often do this in these interviews, but let me ask you now. So we talked about some of your success formulae, and then we got onto building these teams. What's been a struggle for you, or like a dark side of your gifts, right? For being passionate, customer obsessed, being this fresh perspective. How has there been a sense in which any of that perhaps has made it harder for you, or you've had to learn to build these teams? Has there been a kind of a difficulty in management that you've had to work through?
No, I think I've chosen to be in these fairly large companies and blue chip, as you're saying, and it's really become, to me, it's been like a home and a platform for making change. Now, what also comes with them is usually quite complex structures and matrix and governance and all of that. And I'm fine. I work extremely well in a matrix because I have I think most people who are really, if you're truly impact driven and not just figuring out your own KPI, I think matrix is fine because you're not so tied up to your own siloed KPI. And I think my darker moments here, I think, are where I struggle, where I still, after all these years, find it challenging. It is that the silos that exist within a matrix and the governance that surround them. And if you think about what I said in the beginning, that really works against what I think is creating impact, because to me, that is about actually being focused on the bigger impact. And it is about customer obsession. It is about building those teams. It's not about reviewing different KPIs in different silos that may not actually add to that impact, but it actually may be somebody feel good at the time. So, and this comes with all large companies, and then the degree varies, of course. But this is clearly, and of course, I've learned because I've been in this world now for so long. But it clearly isn't. It's not where I prefer to spend my time. And quite honestly, I try to minimize my time on that and have my time focused on that, what I think is impact creation.
Well, it's interesting because that matrix you talked about, a bit like the matrix in the film, it's like the environment in which all these teams operate.
Yes.
And when I'm working with teams, I'm often really focused on getting them not to think so much about internally, although there's a role for that and we'll definitely do that, but also what they often don't think about, which is like, what's the system in which we operate? And actually, how is that shaping us or stopping us from doing some things? But also, how can we influence the system? Is it how do we, perhaps we don't need to just change ourselves, perhaps we need to kind of work at changing some of our stakeholder engagement in certain ways. I love to say, if you've got a relationship issue in your team, perhaps you don't actually have a relationship issue, perhaps you have a stakeholder management issue that's showing up in terms of stress and unrealistic expectations. That is causing friction in the team, not because people don't like each other or because they haven't done their Myers-Briggs types, but because there's all these pressures on them that they can't respond to, for example. So
absolutely, absolutely. I think that's a very, very important point. And you cannot ignore it, right? Because you cannot exist outside the system. You need to be really mindful and understanding of that to have impact.
Yeah, well, it's like, as the fish says, water, what water?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
We don't know, we're in it.
So I developed along the way, given that this is my dark spot, which is also not my passion. And I realized, ending up in these large, really fascinating companies, that there's so much interesting things going on internally that I could spend 100% of my time internally. Right. And also, the more senior I became, actually, the more you got drawn into all these things. So I developed my own formula to that I call 50-30-20, which is 50% of my time should be spent externally. A maximum 20% of my time should be spent on governance. I mean, really pure governance, and 30% should be spent with the teams, developing the teams, coaching, developing business ideas, being part of solutions and creation, etc. And I tell you, this is the third company I'm in since I developed that formula. In my first company, it was that I came up with this. My first years in Sony Ericsson, I had not figured this out, but EMC was so customer obsessed that was my easy task. my other two companies, it's really been a challenge to keep to this. Governance will eat your time if you're not really cautious on. So I always work with my teams on this to figure out, because 50-30-20 is mine in the type of roles I have. It may be 30-60-10. I don't know. It depends on your role, but really be mindful on, because that's about impact. How you spend your time, that's your most important currency in how you create impact. Your investments has money as nothing. It's not even comparable to how you spend your time. So, and I learned this along the way. I had no idea when I started out, but really be mindful on how are you spending your time. Look back at the last week and say, sometimes it looks like a catastrophe and sometimes it looks really good. Look at your week coming up on a Sunday night to say, well, have I set this up so I can actually have impact? This has been one of my maybe most important learnings, actually.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I'm actually right now I'm running a program called the Productivity Accelerator, which is taking a bunch of execs through this whole question about how do I free myself up for more strategic activity. And one of the key parts is you've got to identify what is your impact formula, right? And you've articulated yours in a really great way, which is, where am I? When do I know I'm in my sweet spot and going to maximize my contribution to the business? And where actually am I getting distracted by lower level stuff? And as you said, governance could eat all your time, as can email and all sorts of things. You need to kind of force yourself out of that so that you can spend time with customers, see new trends, whatever it is that you need to do.
Yeah,
so I love that.
Absolutely.
So just to wrap up then, Helen, no matter how much we've achieved, there's always a next level to get to. So where would you love to multiply your own impact in the coming months or quarters or years? What next level look like for you?
Yeah, it's a good question, and I thought of it when I knew I was going to speak to you, because you don't think about this every day. As such, but I think and given what we just talked about, I think it's striving for, and outside of work, I'm quite involved in, I'm mentoring several women. I'm mentoring startup founders, etc. I'm investing. I'm on board with some of the smaller ones, etc. So I think more of my, spend more time. I get you talk about noise, get rid of even more of the noise and spend more time with people like that. And you feel you have some of the time I spend with, I was at a tech meetup the other day, young tech stars. And some of the time when you share things and when you walk into joint coaching, etc., you like, I didn't have any of those people in my life at that age. And so I think spending more time on having impact on society, on helping. We haven't talked much about continuous learning and skilling, but that's a real core topic for me. Encouraging that to be part of the culture of a country, I think is really important, to get people to acquire new tech skills, because if you don't, you'll be in a digital divide way outside of the quality of life that you need to have. So these are things I'm really, really passionate about, and try to get rid of even more of that noise and spend even more time on those things. I think that will increase my impact.
And just to push you on that, what will you have to do differently to do that? Like, what's the personal challenge in that, right? I mean, some people say I need to make more time, but how's
I think I think it's true. I think the personal challenge is to be even more disciplined on things that eat your time, such as email. We all have those times, right? So emails, for example, if you take that as an example, when I started out, I had this principle that I wanted to respond to everybody who contacted me, whether it was a phone or an SMS at the time or an email, and I could do that. Today it's completely impossible, but I'm probably still overdoing it. I still answer, oh, that's so nice, thank you, etc. And maybe I don't need to do all of those. I need to cut that noise before, because it's not, and it may be nice, but it is probably nice most of the time. But if you look at that versus, if I can cut even, maybe I can cut another couple of more hours per week by not doing that, and use that for impact. And I think this is a good conversation. You reminded me about it, because I think we constantly need to look for that. Those, if we want to have real impact, I think we need to constantly need to look for those, and they will creep back. They will come back and creep back, and you need to get them.
Yeah,
And your
true.
habits are hard to change, right? So you need to remind yourselves on those habit changes, and this is a good reminder for me.
And it's an interesting one because there's these two things about focus and serendipity, and they're kind of at odds.
Yes.
So it's this kind of like balance between being super laser focused on my goals, but also having these moments of randomness that can come in. So if you never see any emails apart from those of your leadership team or whatever, super focused, but you might not get that interesting customer email or
no,
that.
it's a super good. It's
email.
A really good point. I tell my team that they have to make space for the unexpected meetings. So in their external time, especially, create space for the unexpected meetings. So it's not just the meeting that you are 100% sure is going to be almost a good meeting, but I spend time on taking unexpected meetings with entrepreneurs or potential partners or some very small customers who sometimes tell me, I can't believe you're meeting with me, but it's also for a selfish reason. I feel like they may be onto something. I need to learn something, and then we come back to that learning again, that you actually build that into your mindset. So that's serendipity, and that you cannot, and you have to. We talked about this before about diversity. You have to get a diverse input into your mind, right? Otherwise, it doesn't work. So it cannot be that you're saying I'm going to only take emails from 15 people. No, that's impossible, right? Yeah.
Exactly. Well, hey, Helene, thanks so much for this. It's been really fascinating to think this through with you, to learn, to focus on that desire for contribution, for that passion, the different perspectives, to kind of have to think through, how do I operate in this matrix structure with these silos, and yet I want to contribute at my maximum. And then some of that advice around teams, right, around actually connecting the corporate mission to your own personal reason. And I think I loved your comment around teams don't just exist by themselves, right? Just because they're on an org chart, they only exist if you actually invest in them and you build them, which I think is so important. And then I think I love your 50-30-20 formula, which is just a great way of bringing together your thinking about how do I create impact, and you create a model around that, right? Create a way of operating. So thank you for sharing your wisdom and having such a fun conversation today.
Thank you. I really enjoyed it, Richard.
If anybody wants to get in touch with you, what should they do?
So I think we are LinkedIn fanatics. So LinkedIn is a really good way, and Twitter and Instagram, etc. So, and I think that's also a good way to see different sides of the company and also my own leadership, actually. So please get in touch.
Perfect. Well, thanks once again, Helene, and speak to you soon.
Thank you. Speak soon. Take care.
Bye-bye. I hope you enjoyed this conversation. Now let's talk about you. When you're in top leadership, when you're in the biggest role of your career, who supports you at a deep level as you lead others? Who helps you multiply your impact and get to the next level? If you're ready to learn more about our content, our coaching, and our community, then visit us at xquadrant.com.